Undercover for so long, what have I become? Empty, desolate, I waste away in the bitterness, in the broken dreams in which I always seek my identity that you stole from me. What a nice design, Dr. Frankenstein, indeterminate, unidentified strangers for so long. Tell me where I belong. I'm not gonna fall in love.
All right. Well, hey, everybody. This is Matt from DonorChildren. I'm here with Stephanie Blessing. She's a member on DonorChildren. I've known Stephanie for, I don't know, how many years has it been now?
I think your wife was pregnant with your first, maybe?
So like 4 years or so. But we're in Memphis, Tennessee. Sorry for the silly microphone I'm holding. Try to keep it out of the way. But anyway, we're in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm on one of the last legs of my epic journey to meet my dad. He lives in Kansas City, Kansas. And along the way, I've been trying to meet up with people I know from DonorChildren and other online communities. And Stephanie is somebody I've known for many years, and I respect a lot. And she's actually done some neat work. She was on Anonymous Father's Day, this documentary. If you haven't watched it, you can, I think you can rent it for a couple bucks or something.
Yeah, and I think it's on Amazon Prime right now. I don't know how long it'll.
Yeah, so there's actually documentaries out there about donor conception you guys maybe haven't heard about, but go check out Anonymous Father's Day. There's also like breeders, and there's another one coming out. Exploitation.
That's an older one.
Okay. Breeders is about like surrogacy.
Yes.
And exploitation is about
the
egg donors and women selling their eggs and all that.
Yeah.
And I think they're coming out with a new one, the CBC network.
They are, but I can't remember anything about
Jennifer Law, she produces a lot of these with the CBC network, and you worked with her?
I did. I got to meet her in Chicago when I did a bioethics conference at Trinity University. I can't remember what year that was, but I happened to get to speak at the bioethics conference and then meet with her and take part in Anonymous Father's Day. So that was really
So you met her there, and that's how you were recruited for that at this bioethics conference. And where was the conference at? That sounds interesting. Chicago. Yeah. Is that something they do every year?
I think so. Trinity University. I was trying to remember more specifics, but I can't off the top of my head. But yeah, that's something I'll look into.
Yeah, that would be neat to check out maybe. And then Stephanie and I, we both have large families. So thankfully my wife's watching our kids right now. That we're in an Airbnb. We're in this cool building. But I just kind of wanted to, introduce you all to Stephanie Blessing. You may have seen her already on Anonymous Father's Day. And just kind of update you on the legs of my trip and how meeting my biological father went. But I guess if we want to get to know Stephanie first. So going back to these 8 stages I came up with, and I actually talking to my dad in Kansas City, I shared these with him, and he actually said, you're kind of missing something. You're missing the word grieve or grieving. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty, he's a psychiatrist. But it was pretty cool for him to reveal that to me, because that's what I used to describe what I went through these 8 stages. It was a grieving process. So I probably should rename it like the 8 stages, of being donor conceived, grieving, self-actualization. I don't know. That sounds pretty long. But basically, the first stage I came up with was the awakening. So I described an awakening for me as like I started having these feelings and questions when I was a child, like 12 years old, kind of hitting adolescence and forming an identity and looking at, why does my dad's chest hair look different than mine? And why does
Did you have chest hair at 12 years old?
No, but it starts coming in. Wondering. I mean, it starts coming in as through adolescence, which they say stops at 25. So, but those were questions I had. Like, why do we look different? Why do I look the way I look? Why do we not connect in some way? And why do I just feel like I don't fit into something? I'm missing something. And then also combining that with the story that my mom and social father told me about how I was conceived, and
What were you
sort
told?
of leaving some holes in the story. So he would always tell the story, and it was like, my mom went from 84 to 86. She had 2 miscarriages, and then she had me. And then in 90, went back and had my sister with the same man. So my sister and I have the same biological father. And but he would always tell the story, and he would get really emotional sort of at the end, saying she was really tired and kind of at her end of trying because it was exhausting and emotional. And he says he believes that God conceived me at that moment. That was his kind of fantasy, like conception story that he believed, and told it very emotionally. And that was the end of the story. But I didn't know what he meant. Like, what do you mean? It just seemed weird, you know? All I knew is they went for fertility treatment. I didn't know what that meant. I was a kid, and they don't really talk about it in school. So
Yeah, you don't get that in sex ed.
no. So my awakening was kind of like subconscious, but then I had an event in June 6, 2012, when I was having my first child, and I saw the ultrasound, and I saw her on the screen as like a blueberry size or whatever. And that visual thing, that the visual image of my first child impacted me, and it brought back these like feelings I had that I'd kind of like stuffed away somewhere in my psyche. And excuse me. And so I asked him that day, like my stepdad, social father, how is there something you're not telling me? I called him because I feel like there's always this story, but something's missing about how I was conceived. And that's when he told me. So that's mine in a nutshell. Do you want to share yours? Your story?
Yeah, excuse me.
So I was 25 when that happened.
Well, when I was younger too, I remember thinking something didn't seem right. Excuse me. Memphis weather.
Yes, the weather's changing here.
We had a family picture up on the wall, and I was probably 7 or 8, which would have made my half sister. Do you want me to hold it?
No, it's okay.
Would have made my half sister 2 or 3. So it's the 4 of us, my mom and dad, and me and my sister. And I would look at this family picture, and I would think, I don't look like my mom at all. My coloring, my hair color was more like my dad, but I didn't look like him either. I just felt like kind of the odd man out. And I remember asking my mom a couple of times growing up, who do I look like?
Because you have these dark features.
Well, and my dad was dark, but I didn't share his features. Like, he had a very, I want to say large nose, but he had a prominent nose, and just, you can just tell features. And so I felt like I didn't look like anybody, but I had heard stories about my mom being pregnant with me, and the first time I kicked, they got up and went to IHOP and had breakfast. I say IHOP, I don't know. Anyway, they went and had breakfast.
She hopped. Let's go to IHOP.
That's stories about when my mom's water broke with me, and C-section because I was breached. So adoption never seemed to be
you knew you weren't adopted, yeah.
But I knew something, like you, something was off.
Wow.
My parents had been married for 14 years before they had me. And so they dealt with infertility. And all I knew was that they had infertility, they had fertility issues. My mom's cycle wasn't normal. My dad had a problem. He had some kind of surgery. And a few months later, they got pregnant with me. So there were holes too, but nobody wants to hear.
Nobody asked questions either in your family, because they thought, oh, great, they finally got pregnant.
Yeah. And
so your family thought you were always his daughter.
Yeah. And my personality was more like him, more quiet. anyway, so it seemed to fit, and I had no issues bonding with my dad. I was a daddy's girl, and I loved him and adored him, and still do. He's been gone six years. But something just wasn't right, and my husband and I would even talk about it. I'm trying to figure out what it is, because it just didn't make sense.
This lasted into your adulthood. You were married, started having your own kids already?
Yeah, my oldest, like you, I mean, I had my oldest and he looked like me. Well, I didn't look like anybody else in my family. So it was crazy to see this kid who had my features, even though he was a boy, he still looked similar to me. And I didn't realize, I mean, looking back, I didn't realize like how big that was for me to see another person who looked like me. When up until I was 24, I'd never had anybody who looked like me before, because my sister and I don't look anything alike.
And she's also donor conceived? No,
my parents were married 19 years when my dad did get my mom pregnant.
Oh, wow.
Surprise. So
you had a control and you were the experiment, kind of. She was the control. You could compare yourself to another woman who's comes from him.
Yeah. And that was actually really good, because once I did find out at 32, this is probably, you've probably got a good name for it.
Okay.
But there was a,
you had an awakening?
Well, I think that awakening, the way you described it, happened when I was younger, when I finally found out at 32. That that my parents used a sperm donor. It made me think back over my childhood and question all the memories that I had about my dad and who I was. And thankfully, I was not, thankfully for my parents and for me, I wasn't a rebellious kid at all and never had those issues. But there were a couple of times where I could be a pill just like anybody else. And so, but I wondered, did my dad ever look at me and say, you definitely belong to somebody else. You're not my daughter.
Yeah.
And I don't think he did. And having my sister, that control, I was able to see my dad did love me the same way he loved her. And so I think I'm very blessed, and unfortunately, not everybody has my experience.
Yeah.
But I was blessed to have a social dad who loved me the way he did his own daughter.
Cool.
But it was still a difficult thing to go through.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. So the next stage was to be or not to be. So you kind of, the red pill or the blue pill of the Matrix. Have you seen that movie?
It's been a while.
So like the red pill is like the truth, and blue pill is kind of like blissful ignorance, and you don't want to deal with it. So do you feel like there was ever a point when you found out that you just didn't want to deal with it for a while, or did you took the red pill pretty quick? I have always, truth, as a Christian, truth is very important to me. And so I was never one of those people who just said, I'm good. Yeah.
My dad raised me. He loved me. I'm satisfied with that. I was satisfied with that. I was very thankful for it. But I also wanted to know where I came from. I mean, seriously, I look in the mirror and I couldn't pinpoint. Yeah, I couldn't pinpoint where I came from. I would look at my oldest son and say, oh, he got his eyes from me and his dark hair from me. But I couldn't trace my way up or down, however you want to.
Right.
Anyway.
Stopped at you, yeah.
So, yeah, I wanted to know the truth. And the day after I found out, I started trying to learn a whole new language.
Year roughly?
Let's see, 2009.
Okay.
May of 2009.
So the DNA testing was available at that point, I think, right?
Yeah,
and it
never occurred to me to do that. I just got on Google and tried to find the doctor. My mom did remember her doctor's name. It wasn't until maybe a year later when I had a friend buy me a DNA kit. I had this crazy dream. Do you want to hear this dream?
Yeah, sure.
So my mom had me, and this is not the dream. I was breech. So 77,
they did the wrong way.
They did C-sections, and the dad was not in the room during a C-section.
Gotcha.
So I had this dream.
And you were born what year?
77.
77. Okay. And what was the doctor's name your mom went to?
I I don't even remember now. He was an endocrinologist. So her OB was somebody
What
different.
city or state?
In Dallas, Texas.
Dallas, Texas, endocrinologist.
And he was at
in 77.
Southwest, UT Southwest.
UT
Dallas.
Southwest, Dallas. So if anybody's watching and Stephanie looks familiar, that's where she was conceived, allegedly.
Well, no, I do know now.
Okay.
So my dream was that my mom had the C-section, but her baby died. And my biological mother didn't want me. And so the doctor and the nurses concocted a plan to switch me. My mom was knocked out from the surgery. My dad was not in the room. So I woke up thinking it is entirely possible that I don't belong to my mom or my dad because I didn't look like my mom. And who would know? Because my mom was knocked out. My dad wasn't in the room. And so I told this dream to a friend. And she said, I'm buying you a DNA test. You're going to take it with both your parents.
Wow.
So my first DNA test was between the three of us. And so I got to be the one to call my mom and tell her that my dad was not my biological dad, which is so
because they actually thought that it was it could be.
I think that they wanted it to be true. And so I think that there were different circumstances. Like, I was smart like my dad. I had my dad's hair color. Thick ankles like my dad.
So you think it was sort of sold to them like your dad had a kid once. Well, did they mix in? Did your parents go and have sex afterwards?
Yes, because they were told to. You go home, you have sex, and pretend like this didn't happen. And
then, so there was a possibility because it was mixing in a way. It could be, and it was kind of like a fantasy.
And they wanted it to be true. I mean,
yeah,
you're married to your spouse, so you want to have a baby with your spouse.
Yeah.
So it felt really weird to call my mom and tell her that, usually it's supposed to be the other way around.
And in a weird kind of, it's kind of gross to think about, but when you have sex, it's actually increases fertility, right? Because your bodies are working. So, in a weird way that their union may have helped facilitate your conception, but obviously he's not your biological father. And I think the same thing happened with mine too.
Well, and I thought they'd been married for 14 years. Now's the time when they get pregnant. It just didn't.
And they were how old?
Let's see, my mom would have been 30 when she got pregnant.
30?
And my dad would have been 32 or 33.
Okay. And if you remember the doctor's name, let me know while we're here. But is it on your DonorChildren profile, your doctor?
Let me think.
Maybe. If not, you can add it later.
Yeah, it might be because when I did that profile, it was still fresh. It's not fresh anymore in my mind.
Right. So if anybody wants to contact Stephanie Blessing, you can contact her through DonorChildren. If you join, just message her on there.
Yeah.
So
I haven't found any siblings yet.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing they're out there.
Are you on all 3 DNA sites?
I am not on Ancestry. That's the last one.
Okay. Definitely get on there.
It was the second test where I found a first cousin where I was able to find my biological father.
Cool. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
So defining the relationships. So that's the third thing. This third stage is, so now that you've taken the red pill and you want to deal with this, now who are these people? Like, so you described your father who raised you, your social father. He meant a lot to you. You still see him as your dad. But then how did being donor conceived affect how you defined all the relationships in your life? And then the next stage is what are you seeking? So once you figured out who people are, then that helps you kind of decide what you're looking for.
I spent the first 6 weeks or so really mourning the biological loss to my dad and his family. My dad's dad was a cowboy.
To your social father?
Yes. Sorry.
That's all right.
Yes.
So you grieved for him,
yes,
not for yourself.
Right.
Okay.
Because I no longer belonged to this family where my grandfather was a cowboy and my grandmother was
you grieved the loss of that for you.
For me and for just, it did alter things in my mind because suddenly I was not who I thought I was.
Right.
And that was so painful, and it was so, unique. Like, you can't just call your best friend and say, this is what happened. And she says, oh, I know exactly how you feel. Like, nobody knows how that feels.
Right. It's hard to
It's-
find compassion and empathy being donor conceived, for sure. You almost have to
Yeah.
find another donor conceived person to
Yeah.
really, and even then you get mixed responses.
You do, because some
they may
people-
be at a different stage in the grieving process, and
Right.
they may be in denial. They may be not, they may be sucking on the blue pill for a while.
Yeah. So I never dealt with depression before either, but that really sent me into a spiral of depression. My children were all younger. My youngest was not even a year old. My husband would have to tell me, go feed the baby, go change his diaper, go start dinner. You need to wash clothes. Like, I could not function. I had to be told what to do because I was just a zombie.
Yeah.
It was so difficult to deal with. But after that 6-week period or so, I kind of started coming out of it, and then realized that there's this man out there that I did not know, who was my biological father. And then the grieving started all over again for somebody else.
Wow.
Just a weird,
Never thought about it
weird
in a two-part
situation.
grieving for grieving the loss of the identity you had, and now grieving the loss of the identity you don't know what it is and that you've missed out on your whole life.
Yeah.
Wow,
it was crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I can relate to that because I went through depression too. So I can definitely relate. And it lasted like a year because I also was unemployed from losing a job, and also had a baby. And so, yeah, that was a rough time.
Yeah.
And it was hard finding empathy, even from counselors or ministers. Nobody knows what to say because they're like, I don't ever heard of this or thought about it. So
my husband's a pastor. He's had a lot of different experiences, and he had never dealt with that, but he was my lap to sit in and my shoulder to cry on.
That's cool.
He was amazing. But I didn't have any counselors or anything. It was a lot of prayer, a lot of tears, and my husband just holding me and reminding me of who I really am.
Yeah.
Who
Also,
my identity is.
And is.
Yes.
Yeah. And also, like, for me, realizing the most important thing in my life is my wife and kids. And so all this other stuff comes second. But for a while, I think I made this almost like the most important thing in my life that I had to figure out. And that created problems in my marriage, and stuff like that. So that was good for me to learn to keep things in perspective.
It's hard though, because I felt like
It's
bedrock,
life-shattering.
and the bedrock of who I thought I was had suddenly cracked.
Right. It makes you question everything that you've ever been told, believe.
It did.
Thought.
It did.
Yeah.
It did.
Because the very people that raised you, you're supposed to trust the most, you thought are your parents, and have kept a secret from you. And it's like this betrayal. And if you can't trust them, who can you trust? And what is real?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and looking back now, removed from the raw emotion of it, I can see why they didn't tell me. First of all, their doctor told them not to tell anybody. So nobody knew. And
Same
that
for
was
mine, yeah.
That was the wisdom of the day, is to
and
not
also
tell.
Beyond that, it's self-serving too, because they don't have to confront you may not be his daughter, and they can just go on believing the blue pill life, got this family, we're happy.
Yeah.
I'll treat her as my own and not think about it.
Yeah.
Which sounds like he was a good dad.
He was. But then I had to deal with forgiving my parents for lying. And
this was after he had passed away?
No, it was all kind of mixed up in the middle of it. It was such a storm of emotions. I mean, but I didn't want to hold on to bitterness, because bitterness is, drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. It's not going to do you any good to be bitter. And I didn't want to be bitter. And so I got to practice forgiveness over and over again, because there would be times I would forgive, and then something would come up, an emotion, and I would get angry again. And it's not that forgiveness excuses what was done, but it just lets go of the anger.
Yeah.
Which I didn't have room for anger. I had too much grieving.
Right. Well, that's what they say is, and depression is like unresolved anger. It's like you take the anger you feel and you just kind of stuff it away inside and you become depressed. I've heard that.
I think my depression was from not knowing the truth about who I was. So I was very confused about what's the reality here? What's the truth?
Right.
I've lived for 32 years thinking that I was one way when in fact I'm actually a different way.
So did you ever reconcile with your mom and social father? Actually talk about it?
My dad was
were they supportive at all with you going on this documentary? That's got to be a big conversation topic. You going on a TV basically.
It was kind of crazy. Excuse me.
Sorry.
I talked with my mom the whole time through it. And about 6 months after she told me, we finally got to sit down again because she lives out of town. So we got to sit down again. And she said, I'm sorry. I had no idea that this is what I was creating in you when I went this route.
That was after Anonymous Father's Day?
No, let's see. That would have been about 6 months after she told me. I think Anonymous Father's Day would have been 2 or 3 years.
So how did she know you were struggling? Did you share it with her? Or?
Yeah.
So she was actually empathetic.
Yes. I mean, she didn't want me to struggle. She didn't understand. She understood emotionally, I think, while I was struggling, but not.
She didn't understand the deeper identity stuff. And did you talk about feeling betrayed at all or anything, like not being told?
I think so. I think I did, because I was pretty open with her. I mean, I didn't tell her everything just because I didn't tell anybody everything, but she knew what I was going through.
Yeah.
My dad, when I found out, he was in the last couple of years of a disease that was kind of like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. It was robbing him of his ability to speak. And so he really couldn't respond back to me, but I was able to tell him that I loved him and that he was my dad. So there was reconciliation there, and I knew that he loved me. And so it ended well with my dad.
Yeah.
And my mom and I our relationship is fine. But I think a lot of it is fine because she was able to say, I'm sorry for putting you through this. I didn't know what I was doing. It always helps the relationship. You can forgive somebody and not have a relationship, but to have that relationship, it has to be both ways. And she was able to apologize for.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was good.
That's awesome.
It was a huge blessing.
Yeah. How many years did that take between finding out and feeling like you had reconciled?
I think because she was never antagonistic towards me, I didn't have a lot of the drama that a lot of people tend to have because their parents are very antagonistic towards their feelings. It was that 6-month mark when we were able to get back together again, where she was able to sit down and we talked. And I even remember saying, I have this biological family that I don't know. I've got grandparents, I've got aunts and uncles and cousins, and the light came on.
Right.
Like I could see it where she realized it, and she apologized and she wrote me a letter. And
because that's why she had you, because she valued biology. So there's this contradiction of like someone using a third party to have a child. It's like they're valuing biology by choosing that method because they want to be they want to be related. Yeah. But then they're not thinking about, oh, my kid's not going to know half their family.
And
so it's
what she said to me, and what I've heard so many times, and I know you've heard this too, is the drive to have a baby is so strong, you just kind of lose all reason, and your goal is a baby, and
It becomes an idol is what I call it.
yeah,
It's an
it really
idol.
kind of does, I think, for some women.
Yeah. I felt like an idol growing up, kind of a trophy kid.
Mm.
And I think my sister has the same feeling or story. But yeah, I think people make kids almost like this object they have to have. It's this idol. If they don't have it, they won't be happy. But then that's not necessarily what life's about. Maybe you have a different purpose in life, you know, because having kids is hard.
Yes.
It's all self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing all that.
Yeah. But I'm good with my mom. My mom's very supportive now. And my dad was, insofar as what he understood, because I didn't share a lot of things with him because of his health.
Right.
So I'm very thankful.
So he was not doing well, so you don't want to stress him out too much.
Right. But he did know, excuse me, about the first DNA test. I mean, he was able to give consent.
Gone now?
He is.
Yeah.
So he knew the results of that. And then when I took the first, the family
23andMe?
Family tree DNA.
Family tree DNA.
That was the first one I did. And I was able to find out my ethnicity.
Which is?
My biological father is 100% Ashkenazi Jew.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And the crazy thing is, I was always interested in Jewish culture growing up, and I would read books and
something,
anyway.
Imprinted from your ancestors.
Yeah, it's some kind of interest there. But and so my dad laughed. He thought it was great. He was like, maybe you'll be rich. But I married a pastor. That's not going to happen. But
does it make you look at being a Christian, look at your faith differently, coming from a Jewish family, that you didn't have the environmental, but you have this long ancestral line of a connection to this people?
Yeah, people. I mean, the New Testament talks about anyone who has faith in Christ as a child of Abraham. So by faith, I'm a child of Abraham, but also through my biological father, I am too, which is really cool.
That's why I want to stay friends with you.
But you know, the really cool thing was I think that no matter what my ethnicity would have found it being, I finally had a group that I could connect to or identify with. I was no longer just this
floating a thing in the universe.
Yes. And people I remember a couple of people asking me when I was younger, are you Mexican? Because I was really tan when I was younger. And like, no, I'm just a white girl. I even had somebody ask me if I was Asian.
Wow.
I don't know. Maybe when I was younger.
Dark hair.
My eyes. I don't know. But it was just something really big for me to be able to say, this is what I am now.
Too, because growing up, people ask because they're just curious. Well, what are you, this or that? And then you're always like, I don't know what I am. And so that reinstills this, like, those feelings. But you kind of thought you were part of a family though growing up. So you would give them the answer that you're what? Just a white girl. That's all I knew.
You
didn't know his family history.
My mom was from Alabama. My dad's family was Texas. We were just.
You didn't know.
I didn't know any family history other than we'd just been here. Like there were no immigrant stories or anything. So, yeah.
Well, the next thing, let's see, is what are you seeking? So you found your biological father, you said, and have you ever spoken to him? And what are you seeking from that? Still in limbo?
Well, what I was seeking was just his identity at first. I wanted to see a picture of him. I wanted to know his name. And so I was, excuse me, I was able to get a yearbook from when he was on campus in Dallas. And so at that point, I knew that I was Jewish. And so I went through the 4 years of the 4 classes that would have been on campus when I was conceived, went through the Jewish names. Fortunately, in the 70s, there were not a lot of Jews in Dallas in medical school. So that was a short list. You found out
in college?
Well, no.
You were 30?
No, I was 32, but 32. I got his yearbook.
Oh, gotcha.
That he would have been in. And so there was a short list of Jewish men.
So that narrowed it down for you?
It narrowed it down. So
and how did you know your mom said it was a medical student or what?
I was able to talk to the man who took over the clinic where I was conceived after my mom's doctor left.
Was it medical school or was it?
Yes, they actually started a clinic in late 76, early 77. Yeah. I would have been one of the.
Come on, Ed.
I would have been one of the first people.
Got some water for you if you need. Thank you.
You hear me coughing?
I told her. So what university was it again?
UT Southwestern Dallas.
UT Southwestern Dallas. Got it. 77.
Yes.
And so go back to you were telling about you found him in a yearbook. There weren't that many Jewish men in that area, so.
And I was just praying he wasn't adopted with the last name Smith or something.
Was he a medical student too?
He was.
Okay.
And so
then you just Googled his name?
I Googled,
all of them?
So I Googled everybody that I could find. I had a notebook, trying to keep track of everybody. And so when I took the second DNA test and got the email that my matches had come in, I went on there not expecting to find anybody, because the family tree DNA, I had 2,000 or 3,000 distant cousins and nobody close enough to be able to.
It's the least, like I recommend 23andMe first and do the health test, because then you get like health statistics. Yes. And that helped me a lot when I tested in 2013. And then Ancestry is also really big. Yeah. Family Tree is not as big, but I still recommend doing all three. And then GEDmatch is a free website you can upload your data to. So, so you didn't have a lot of, but Ancestry or
Family Tree DNA, I had 2,000 or 3,000.
But then matches. You did 23andMe.
I did 23andMe, not expecting to have any close matches, because why would I? And the first cousin popped up. And so I was able to get in touch with her, and she was able to tell me, oh yeah, my uncle on my mom's side is a doctor. He was in medical school.
At UT South.
She knew it was in Texas, but wow. I mean, between the DNA test and yeah. Wow. So as soon as she told me his name, I knew exactly who he was. I'd watched some of his YouTube videos.
No way. You'd already really seen him before?
Yeah. What? So I'm on the phone with her.
Oh, wow. Because he's an OB, so you were.
No, he was not an OB. Oh. He's all kinds of things.
But he's a
radiologist, an oncologist. Anyway, wow. He's big, huge brain. And so as soon as she said his name, I was in the car with my husband, so he's driving. And like I am sobbing, the kind of sob that doesn't have any sound. And so she's like, are you there? And my husband's like, breathe, Stephanie. And just the shock, it was, okay, so it's been 9.5 years that I've known him total. I found out who he was 3.5 years ago. So like 6 years of
3.5 years
searching for this man. And finally I hear his name from a source who knows.
And he's on YouTube, so you can hear him talking.
And he's on YouTube, yeah.
Wow, that's cool. So a lot of doctors are also very private, I've noticed, from other people's situations, so it's hard to even find. My dad, biological father, was in the media back in the 90s, so it took me a long time and some crazy miracles, but I got a copy of this story that my dad was in 92 on hard copy. So I got to
seeing that.
Yeah, I got to see my dad walking and talking and hear some of his thoughts specifically on the practice. So that was very impactful for me, not so much in the best way, but I still was persistent and kept reaching out like once a year. And it took about 4 years until here I am on a trip going to meet him, for the first time. And we spent like a week there in Kansas City hanging out. I helped him out a lot and we had fun. But tell me a little bit about your father, your biological father, and how that's gone so far. Well, because it took me 4 years. So
my cousin that I found.
And what do you want now? Do you want more? What happened? You said in the beginning you just wanted an identity, but then where are you at now?
My cousin reached out to him and told him that she had been in contact with me, and he was shocked, which I find kind of ironic because he is this brainiac scientist.
He should know that the DNA testing is.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I guess it was just one of those things he did for a while, and then it was over, and it was, a long time ago.
Kind of moved on and forgot.
Yeah. And so it took him about a month to contact me, and he told her, tell Stephanie I'll get in touch with her at some point.
Wow.
And
That's
so
nice.
after a month, I'm like, where's he at with this? So
that was hard waiting.
Yeah, it was. He friended me on Facebook, and I was with friends, a lot of friends.
After a month?
Yes.
Okay.
We were having lunch at a friend's house. There were a bunch of families there. And so I pick up my phone and I start freaking out. And they're like, what's going on? I said, he sent me a friend request. Crazy.
And they all knew who you were talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then he sent me a message. And so we started messaging on Facebook. We emailed some, but Facebook just was an easier medium to deal with.
It's kind of nice because he's part of his fear. Maybe, what is she going to try to take me to court or exploit me?
And I had sent a letter through my cousin, just telling him about me, telling him I'm not looking for, I just want to know who you are. I want something more valuable than money. I don't care about money. I want to know who you are.
Oh, that's cool. And Facebook's helpful because it kind of gives you a window into someone's life.
Yeah. I went to his profile page and just scrolled through, and like he would just have all these random math problems and just things like I couldn't even read the sentences because anyway.
So he's a genius.
He was a genius. Yes.
Who loves this math problem that much? This is what they care about.
Yeah. Anyway, so, which is so far, I'm a stay-at-home mom. I have 5 kids. Like my brain doesn't function in math beyond how much my grocery bill is. Yeah. And so, but once upon a time, I was into stuff like that. And so anyway, it was just really cool to see his personality in his Facebook posts without his public persona, I guess. We have never talked on the phone. We've never written letters. We only talk via Facebook Messenger and every now and then email, not much. And you've heard his voice because of YouTube? Yeah. Okay. But we share our sense of humor. He'll write things and I'm just in tears laughing at it. And I'll read it to my husband. He's like, that's not funny. I'm like, no, hilarious. You just don't get it. So there are so many things, even through.
Has he recognized that too, you think? Has your sense of humor through the emails, and maybe he's identifying with you? Yeah, and other things I'll say, and he's like, oh, you're definitely part of this family. You're just like, and name a family member. And that must make you feel awesome to hear him identifying you with the family. Yeah. It's validation. It was, yeah. We are very different people. Yeah. Even though we have a lot of things in common, he's very liberal, not just in politics, but in lots of ways. Social, medical, everything. Yes. Where I'm not, I'm very conservative. Right. I'm a Christian. He's not a practicing Jew, but so we have a lot of differences, and but I still appreciate. Too, yeah. I enjoy talking with him. I enjoy getting to know him, and I know a lot of things about me really drive him insane, and that's okay. Just because you're in a box. He has said a couple of times, I can't believe this Jewish girl is like this Christian. But it is what it is. He's not practicing, so. Yeah, I know, which is crazy. Anyway, so, but it's good though. I have loved getting to know him, and it's really healed so much of the hurt. Giving you some closure. Yes, closure on the pain. There's no pain there anymore. I reject the practice because it's for so many reasons. But man, it's just knowing the truth and
being able to communicate with him has helped tremendously.
Name some, just in a nutshell, why you reject the practice. Some of your thoughts on it.
Because biology does matter. You don't give birth to a baby in a hospital and then just take any random baby home.
Right.
You take your baby home because that's your baby. And so third-party reproduction separates a child from their biological family.
There are people that actually believe, I've seen online, that biological doesn't just mean genetic, but people actually say, well, biological, I grew this baby in my womb, it's my biological child. Like, there's that level of delusion going on in the world that people think because they were the hospitable environment for the child, somehow that's their real child, but they birthed the child, but it's not their genetic. So it's more than just you gave birth, but even further back to DNA, how you're coded, our blueprint.
Well, and it seems like in that sense, it goes back to intent, because there are, what do they call them? The surrogates, the natural surrogates, where if I got pregnant, it's my eggs. I'm the one gestating the baby, yet I give that child to another couple. Well, in that case, you would say, well, it's not my baby. Well, you can't, the lines of demarcation can't come down to intent. I mean, it's crazy.
It goes back to a lack of awareness of what and it's mind-boggling for people like you and me, because our dads are really smart doctors. My dad's a psychiatrist. Your dad's this genius on YouTube, and board certified in every form of medicine. And they don't get the psychological, the human development side of our existence that you would think someone who has this much intelligence would pick up, but it's like they're missing something.
Well, and speaking of which, my biological father told me that he consulted one sister and his wife. They are the only two people he talked to about me, and they both told him not to contact me. And I said, well, why did you contact me then? And he said, because you were looking for me. Man, that meant so much.
So he had some compassion.
He did.
That's good.
He did.
Have you ever asked if you could talk on the phone or share numbers or have a meeting somewhere? You think you will at some point?
We talked at the beginning about, wouldn't it be great to meet? And he seemed to be on board with that. This past summer, I was actually only about 4 hours away from him and threw it out there to him, and he shut it down. So, and that's okay.
Does he have children from his marriage or anything?
He does.
So you have some half siblings?
I have 3 younger half brothers.
Wow. And did you grow up with siblings?
I had my one sister, but I always wanted an older brother.
How cool is that? Yeah. And do they know, do you think? Or do you think, you've looked at their Facebook profiles, you know what they look like at least?
I've done as much research as I can into them. One of them is not on Facebook. The other one, I think, may have had a profile picture like from a long time ago, but that's it. It's just a picture.
What was that like, seeing your half brother, that picture? You see your sons? You see some resemblance with your sons?
A little bit. And I'm curious too, as my kids get older. My oldest son looks the most like my father's family. But the other kids definitely have traits. My youngest daughter, I can show you pictures. But I'm interested in seeing how much more he looks like that side of the family as he grows older. It's crazy how as we get older, we
obviously
look more and more.
You've been on a documentary. I'm sure your kids know about it. So this is something you're here meeting me. So something they're aware of. Do they understand it though?
The younger two who don't know the facts of life yet, don't know how that happened. One of my kids gets angry when I talk about my biological father, and I don't know where that anger comes from.
Sense of abandonment, or maybe he doesn't like that you're hurting.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is. I don't know. That'll be something.
That's interesting.
we talk about
Yeah,
later.
my kids are still fairly young. My oldest is 5.5, so she understands stuff. I explain it to them or her in terms of gardening, like, because we garden a lot. So I say, like we're having our 4th child. I'm just like, how did the baby get in there? Oh, daddy put a seed in mommy. That's so the same thing I say to them about, we literally drove by KU Med in Kansas City, and I said to my oldest daughter, like, hey, that's where daddy was made. And she's like, what? What do you mean? And my wife was kind of like, sure you want to talk about this? But I was like, well, we're my mom and your grandpa that we just met, he put the seed in my mommy, but they were never married. And I explained it's not okay, like what they did, because I don't agree with it, that I don't think it's a good thing. And so I'm teaching that to my daughter, but trying to connect the dots in terms of like simple things. But yeah, it's hard to do with kids.
It is hard.
But she gets a lot. She surprises me how much she understands.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and for us, because both of us are married to a spouse, we have children with that spouse. Our kids have the benefit of growing up with both of their parents. And so I want my kids to know that that's the norm.
Right.
You're not supposed to have children with lots of people. And so, yeah, it's just,
and also,
it's weird
what about,
to explain.
Yeah. And I drove across the country. I've driven thousands of miles now. I'm almost home, but just so that we could meet him and my kids could meet their grandfather. And if he died tomorrow, I at least did my part. I did what I could. And I'm trying to, like, I have pictures of him and my aunt. I met my aunt too. And my half brother I met too. My half sister, I don't know if I'll ever meet her, because I don't know if she wants to know me, but she lives in Seattle. But I still have all their pictures on our wall at home, and pictures of my grandparents that I never met. My grandma just died a year ago, so I didn't get to meet her. And it may sound kind of weird, but I want my kids, you have pictures of your family in your house and you identify with those faces. And I just wanted to have them in our home so that if one day we meet those people, they're not strangers. It's like, oh, we've talked about you. I've known about you since I was little, but we've never met. And there will be, like, hopefully a bond, easier bond. So, yeah.
Family is important.
Yeah.
It matters.
Yeah. So moving forward, you would like to meet, you said you tried, but he's just not open at this point and hasn't reached out. And
I would like to, but if we don't, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Because the hurt really has been healed. I think it would be.
Do you feel like do you feel like illegitimate because he won't meet you? Like he's got this successful practice and family, and he'd be like a bombshell or something? He's afraid of the publicity or the liability or something? Do you think it's something else? You don't know?
I don't know. I think.
Maybe
I don't
someday.
know. Yeah. I can't venture, I guess, because part of me thinks maybe he's just scared to meet me. Just because that would really bring the reality home. Right now, I'm just a friend on Messenger. But
you're more than
I don't
that,
know.
because he does identify you as his daughter to an extent, just not fully, like in the public kind of.
Yeah.
So, well, I hope that works out in the future.
We'll see.
But we'll see.
Yeah.
Sounds like the way you described how the pain left you, that's how I felt too.
Yeah.
When I found him. But even after I found him, I had extreme pain and depression because I faced rejection from him and my half siblings. And I didn't have a support network like you. My spouse didn't really understand, and my mom and stepdad, social dad, were not supportive, and they became alcoholics and were abusive. And up until like the past year and a half, 2 years, they've started to turn around. Like the past year, really. More him, my mom. I don't know. She seems a little more supportive, but then other times she says stuff that, like going on this trip, we dropped our dog off their house in Orlando, and she knows why we're going. And she starts pulling out all these old photos of her mom's family or dad's family and like showing them to me. And there's always this feeling of, or if I'll say, you know, I get my intelligence and drive from my father, and she'll say, well, you get that a lot from dad too, her husband. And to be honest, I get it from my biological father, you know, and, but she just always wants to replace those identifying factors with her family or him, and kind of doesn't allow me to have this identity or be a person, you know. It's dehumanizing, and so I don't feel supported. But it's weird, you know, she's still sucking on the blue pill.
Well, when you're in denial, you're able to keep the illusion up.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Seems to be really important.
I see her through a lens. Her dad had an affair when she was graduating high school, and left the last year she was in school, left the house with another woman. And so I kind of see it as like a generational defect, like, don't deal with it, just sweep it under the rug. We don't talk about things, you know, that sort of thing. I also think that maybe broke her sense of importance of fathers, biological fathers, because her father abandoned them, essentially, you know.
Daddy issues man,
it affects someone's so then what's the next step? So you went on anonymous Father's Day, which, you know what, is funny, every Father's Day, that's actually interesting connection we have. I would email my father and say, happy anonymous Father's Day. Now that was kind of a little spiteful, but then I just started saying happy Father's Day after like a couple years. But the first 2 years I said happy anonymous, and I think I maybe sent him a link to it once. I don't remember. But that documentary was identifying for me, for sure. So thanks for doing that.
That was really good. The other two donor conceived people in it, Barry Stevens and Alana Newman. I think she was Stewart then in the video. I can't remember now.
Alana Stewart Newman.
They were so quotable. Like I just again felt like the fish out of water, just the oddball with my story. They were so compelling.
Who's the guy?
Barry Stevens. He's a Canadian. Wow. He actually did, what's the name of his film? Biodad.
Oh, I need to watch that.
We got to see it here in the US by some crazy, we weren't supposed to see it, but somehow a link worked.
So Biodad, check out Biodad.
Yeah,
Alana Newman runs anonymous.org, which is a great website where people share their stories anonymously, unlike this situation we're in right now. But I also buy Alana's books by the box, and I give them out to people.
That's good.
So they're great to have if you run into somebody and they're like, what? Like, or their, you know, daughter is a surrogate, or their, you know, their girlfriend's a surrogate, or their cousin was donor conceived. And it's like, oh, well, here's a book and here's a sticker. And then
that's awesome that you do that.
Yeah, I do that.
Getting the word out.
Yeah. And then other than that, let's see, what else, what's the next step in your journey? What will you do with what you find? So you've already kind of told everyone what you found. What the next step, other than like, what is there anything else in the DC world? Do you have any things you want to do, or are you just living your life right now and just kind of open to this kind of opportunity?
Yeah, I'm definitely open to talking to people. I would love to find half siblings, but that's probably just going to take DNA testing and just being patient and hoping that they'll and then stumble into it or do it on purpose. However,
because they don't know, probably not.
I mean, I just happened to ask my mom the right question in the right situation.
And if you reach out to them without his consent, that would probably really put a damper on any possible relationship you have.
His 3 sons, I won't do that. 2 of the sons I will never reach out to.
Wow. That's so hard. That's such a hard decision to have to make. To know your siblings, or and risk your relationship with your father, or respect your father and just accept whatever you get. That's a really hard choice.
I mean, as long as he's alive, I will not reach out to them. Once he passes away,
you will.
There's one that I might possibly, I don't know. I guess that'll just be a bridge.
Yeah.
That I have
when
to
you get there
first. Yeah.
And then what's your story going to be? Well, you just shared your story, but what's another way to describe your story is your legacy. You have 5 children. So what is this? How is this? How will you play this into your legacy to your children?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about that. I mean, the reason that I started talking publicly, I started a blog.
Oh, what's your blog?
Oh, I can't even remember.
Oh.
I started it probably, I don't know, 6 or 9 months.
Okay. That was your way of processing?
I cannot even remember. Well, because I am a Christian, I was looking for other Christians who had gone through this, and I couldn't find anybody. Yeah. There was nothing. And so I found a support group. Well, it wasn't even a support group, a Yahoo group.
Mm-hmm. PCBAI?
Yes.
People can see via artificial insemination, yes. Bill Cordray?
Yes. Okay. And when I found it was still very active. Most everything is on Facebook now.
Yeah.
But that was...
Or DonorChildren.
Yes.
On there too.
Or, yes, different
places.
websites. Yeah. It's not really...
PCBA is kind of... He was actually thinking about shutting it down like a year ago. And I said, no, don't shut it down. I was trying to keep it open because, I mean, there's people on there, so.
Well, and you can go back and read those threads. And just hearing from other people who were in my situation was so beneficial.
So finding that community when you found out in 2009, you said?
Yes. Yeah.
Back then there was not a lot, so.
No.
Yeah.
So.
That's why we need community.
Yeah. And that's why I started my blog, because I thought surely there's going to be other Christians who go through this and they need to know that they're going to survive.
Yeah.
I honestly felt like if I had not been a Christian and had hope in Christ, that I would have definitely been suicidal, because I had lots of little children. We had financial issues. This on top of that, life was very difficult for the first 2 or 3 years living with this new reality. It was very difficult. And so I wanted other people to know that they could survive.
I went through the same exact level of depression. I mean, when Robin Williams killed himself, it kind of triggered me because I was so depressed. Like I never thought about suicide, like acting it out, but I felt that way. Like I felt like this pain, this emptiness was so deep. I just didn't want to feel it anymore. And seeing other people go to that level kind of sent me over the edge, feeling more depressed. So you guys aren't alone. If you guys are having problems, call us or email us. We have an email, DonorChildren@gmail.com. If anyone's feeling down, and just reach out, join DonorChildren. You're not alone, and there's support out there. So don't feel alone. I hope you guys found this video. The last thing is, how will I help others with what I now know, which you're doing now, and you did your blog and you did the documentary, and you'll probably do something else in the future. I don't think
you and I did a podcast together. So
we did a radio show, right?
Let's see.
Was it a radio show in Australia? Was it that one or no?
Was it the politician in Missouri?
Man, I can't even remember anymore.
I remember what house we lived in. So it would have been at least 4 years ago.
But it was on the phone, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'll have to dig that up and make sure that's on our news page where I post. I try to keep relevant donor children related news on our news page if you guys want to see where we've been in the news.
So that I was in Cosmo magazine, which I think is hilarious. Pastor's Wife in Cosmo.
Oh my gosh, that is funny.
But it was the UK version of Cosmo. Just different random articles and newspaper articles that I did, just hoping somebody would see my face and say,
cool. You got in there.
She looks like me. Or anyway,
I got in somebody on DonorChildren who has two lesbian moms mentioned my website. So I got in Gay Parent Magazine, and I'm also in World News Magazine recently. So I'm in Christian magazines, I'm in gay magazines. I'm going to be on CBN Network maybe coming later in December. They want to
I don't ever watch the network, but
it's the Christian Broadcasting. I don't know. The medical news producer contacted me and wants to interview me for TV, so that's cool. And then
when you talk about like a legacy, I want Christians to know that just because you're pro-life, anti-abortion, doesn't mean that you can create life any which way you want to.
Because you're creating suffering for these people.
Well, and as a Christian,
right?
If you are a Christian, you should hold to what Scripture says about marriage and children, which is that children should come from marriage. And so something that I really struggled with at the beginning was the fact that because I'm not Catholic, the Protestant world doesn't have the set guidelines of how children should be created. And so I know so many people who are Christians think that life is life, and however you come by it is awesome.
Right.
And that's not the case.
It's not accurate.
It's not the case at all.
To the teachings of Christianity.
Right.
For sure. And I identify with Catholicism in that way because they have a teaching of theology of the body, and they speak out against contraception and abortion and actually third-party reproduction. They specifically, and I've written Focus on the Family multiple years, and I always get kind of a similar response, but it's kind of I call it a cowardly response. It's kind of, we wouldn't recommend it for identity reasons, but we don't really say much else about it. And something I want to talk about with CBN Network is exactly that, what you're talking about. So
get me in on
that. Maybe I'll get you in on CBN Network.
Yes.
You're a pastor's wife, so that'd be great. And that's something I also want to do too, is churches. That's something that's kind of a chip on my shoulder with churches and the Protestant version of Christianity that I grew up with, and I've kind of walked away from because of this. I'm more interested in the Catholic doctrine, but I kind of fall in between because I don't really know, so.
Well, being in the South, you mentioned
really difficult.
We're in Memphis. A lot of Christianity here is more like churchianity.
Yeah.
Their faith only goes about this deep, and there's not a lot of intellectual thought and thinking through the ramifications of things. And so that's what I appreciate the Catholic Church is it's such a global organization that their teachings are like disseminated equally through it. Yeah, and they've got the teachings, but that doesn't necessarily people follow it. I know, exactly. But at least they have the structure there. Yeah, they have the structure. This is right. So I feel you on that. Well, thank you for sharing, and it was so nice to see you. And thanks for everybody listening to Stephanie's story. Reach out to her. You might find her on Facebook or DonorChildren. She's on there as well. Stephanie Blessing. You can email me at donorchildren@gmail.com and join DonorChildren and share this video. Something I got to do is get this podcast put out to all the audio podcasts so you guys don't have to watch YouTube every time. And maybe on another video, I'll share about my trip and meeting my father, since we didn't have time today. But it's been a great trip, and it's been great meeting all of you throughout the country on my trip too. So, all right, see you next time.
Strangers for so long, tell me where I belong. I'm not gonna fall in line. No, I'm not gonna wait this right. Tried to let it go, but it numbs me not to know. Yeah, it numbs me, it haunts me in the mirrors, in the diaries, all the compliments, the accomplishments never weighed as much as the silence. Uncertainty for so long, but I will hold on. I'm not gonna